Hello, everybody. Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. Tonight, we've got Pac-12, we've got ACC, a little bit of Big Ten mixed in there for good measure, all on the table here tonight. I feel like it's been another pretty newsy week. I was sitting there as I was prepping the show tonight thinking like, man, we just don't get non-realignment newsy weeks anymore. No matter what the case is, we're getting something. And today, basically, what we have is Brett McMurphy going on 365 Sports. Shout out to those guys. And I wouldn't really say dropping a bombshell, but dropping some confirmation of kind of the situation that we already thought was the case in the Big Ten, as far as the Big Ten and how they feel about the Pac-12 schools, Oregon and Washington. We also have Pac-12 meetings coming up. The quarterly board meeting is tomorrow, and John Wilner lays out whether or not we should be expecting anything substantive to come out of those meetings. We also have a very interesting John Wilner mailbag. And then the one, honestly, the story today that is the most interesting to me is what is continuing to go on in the ACC, and that is that we are seeing Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, but particularly Florida State really trying to push, I would just say rock the boat almost. They're trying to push unequal revenue sharing, but I think they all know, and War Chant, which has been reporting this, Florida State's On3 site, has sort of outlined this, that the best case scenario is just a very minute bump for Florida State in the grand scheme of things financially. So to me, what they're doing right now is basically just laying the groundwork for the case to leave the conference. They are laying the groundwork for, we're going to go make a run at this. We're going to have our lawyers go make a run at this grant of rights at some point in time, because they continue to say, like, we can't tolerate this big of a gap between us and our peers that are in the SEC and the Big Ten. But their particular concern, obviously, is other SEC schools that are close to them geographically. They continue to say, like, this can't stand. War Chant has reported that they've had attorneys go down and try to check things out. Like, they've parsed through this whole grant of rights, and they continue to say, hey, as we head into meetings, which the ACC also has coming up here, we're going to continue to say, like, we need unequal revenue sharing. This will not stand. To me, I'm really interested in what's going to happen with the ACC and what this timeline is going to be like, because it really feels like they are trying to set the table right now for an exit at some point. I would still think probably more medium term than it is near term, but I don't know. These are very, very interesting stories, and I'll credit War Chant again from the On3 network that put together this story, a very comprehensive story about all this with some great quotes. So that's basically what I have for you today. Let me just scroll back through this and make sure those are the main stories. Yeah, that's what we got. The John Wilner mailbag, as well, as I mentioned. But you guys know, if you've been here before, you can dictate some of the content here on the show tonight. You guys can be a part of this. You do that by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. That is how you will make your voice heard, get your question or comment on the show tonight. Guarantees that it will be on the show tonight. It will tack it up at the top, pin it up at the top for me above everything else in the chat, and make sure that your question or comment gets read so you can make your voice heard, control what content is happening here on the show tonight, and support what it is that I'm doing and bringing you Big 12 content on a week in, week out basis here on the channel. Could not do it without all of your support. I immensely appreciate you guys who do this. Once again, would not happen without all of you. Also, totally free way to help out the channel. We've got 156 people in here, 18 likes on the video. If you could just go give me one click and just like the video, that is another way to help support the channel. Totally free way to do it. If you can also leave a comment under the video, wait until after it's done, leave a comment underneath the video. I would appreciate that as well. Whether you love me, hate me, whatever it is, let me know about it in the comments, and all that engagement does help with the algorithm as well. So I appreciate everybody who does that. If you are catching up after the fact, you didn't hit this live tonight, you can also support the channel on Venmo. It is just John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo to support that way. So I think that's about all the housekeeping we have. Because I did tease this out as the lead story today, we will start with what Brett McMurphy did say on 365 Sports. Of course, Brett McMurphy from the Action Network was at ESPN for a long time. One of the more trusted reporters in college football, and somebody that has dropped in little nuggets here or there in the realignment world. He says, well, I'm going to read actually from a Heartland College Sports article. Let me make sure and give proper attribution here, because they did a really nice job of putting together not only this little bit of information, fairly juicy, from Brett McMurphy, but also um, they pinned that together with some comments from Brock Heward, who is Pac-12 guy, obviously played quarterback there, and then is doing games for Fox. He made comments on a radio show, I believe it was in Utah. I'll have to double check that, about what he saw at some of the meetings that were happening last week and the mood in the Big 12 and the mood in the Pac 12. So it was a really nice kind of summation by Heartland College Sports here. But anyway, starts by saying this: the Oregon Ducks and Washington Huskies have reportedly been vetted and cleared. And those are both in quotes. So these are things Brett McMurphy said. He said, Oregon and Washington have been, quote, vetted and, quote, cleared by the Big Ten. While rumors of the conference's interest in adding the two Pacific Northwest schools have been floating around for months, this is another step in that direction from one of college football's most credible reporters. McMurphy said in an interview with 365 Sports that they are, quote, ready for takeoff if things progress in that direction. Quote, it's a question of when or if the Big Ten wants to add those schools, McMurphy stated. Now, I'm going to pause here before we get into the kind of the why, the crux of the issue, like why haven't they done it yet, if that is the case, and just pause and say, like, I feel like we kind of already knew we were here. You know, I mean, I saw this story out there on Twitter, and I definitely understand why the headline is a little bit eye-catching to see that. But to me, this is just kind of confirmation of like what we already figured. Like Kevin Warren, clearly when he was still in office with the Big Ten, had things moving in the direction of vetting candidates, trying to figure out what was going on with everybody, making sure that they were prepared if and when it was that they were going to have to make a move. And so I think we kind of already knew this. And the question has always been like, does the Big Ten have the appetite? And it seemed like the presidents late in the Warren tenure were certainly putting their foot down, being like, no, we don't really want to do this. Like nobody wants to kill off the Pac-12 and deliver this kill shot and take perhaps a somewhat gratuitous move here to add Oregon and Washington as of right now. This is just Brett McMurphy confirming that, makes it feel a little bit more official that we do have that. I mean, I think everybody has felt like it's a question of when or if the Big Ten wants to add those schools. That's a pretty broad-based statement that encompasses about everything, right? It's not just when, but if. Like I would have thought if he laid it out more like it's pretty much a question of when the Big Ten wants to add these schools. I would tend to kind of agree with that too. I mean, it feels like it is going to happen eventually. It's just like, will the Big Ten be the next to make a major move? Will it come on the heels of a move of schools to the Big 12? Like what is going to be the context of this? Is it going to be some other massive move that sets a bunch of dominoes in motion and then eventually it leads to Oregon and Washington jumping ship to the Big Ten? I think to me it feels more like a matter of when, not if. But if you're going to throw if in there, then yeah, I mean we're covering all our bases there, right? Like that's almost kind of a hedging sort of answer. But as far as the why, like why it hasn't happened yet, if this is the case and they're vetted and cleared, he says, quote, I'm told that the Big Ten and Fox do not want to have blood on their hands for being the reason the Pac-12 blew up. In a way, they're sitting back and waiting to see what happens with Colorado or Arizona. If they leave for the Big 12, that opens the floodgates. That's something else that we have seen recently from folks, that the idea is kind of right now that the Big Ten is laying low to see what happens with the Pac-12 media deal and therefore what happens with the four corner schools and whether or not they're going to stay put. We've had public admissions from the Arizona president. I believe it was the Colorado chancellor that said the same thing. Basically said, like, we'll have a decision to make, but we're going to wait and see what this deal is, and we're confident the deal will be great, and all those typical platitudes that they give to George Kliavkoff and company in the Pac-12. But the point being, they've publicly admitted, more or less, that there is a decision there to be made. Well, I say more or less. I mean, the Arizona president literally did say it, like, then we'll make our decision. So I think we've been here. We've been in this position, but it's just a little bit more official context that Brett McMurphy is adding to all of this. So I think that would be a more ideal scenario for the Big Ten. They don't want to be the ones that come in and are known for like completely derailing the Pac-12. There was a long working relationship with that conference. I know it all kind of goes to hell when you're talking about a realignment setting. Like nobody really cares about all these relationships that much, as we have seen. But when you don't have to, it would be a little bit, I used the word gratuitous earlier. It would be a bit gratuitous here at this point in time, I think, if the Big Ten were to do that. So they don't want to feel like they're the ones with blood on their hands for doing that. So interesting quotes. That is certainly, I mean, it's a great get by 365 Sports. Not only the guest and Brett McMurphy, but then getting that quote, eliciting that quote from him. That's juicy. That's interesting. Even if it does not, I don't think, tell us anything all that new about where the Big Ten is at. The question will still remain, when exactly is it that they are going to do this? Now, the other part of this article from Heartland College Sports, and I think somebody brought this up in the chat last week at one point in time, that Brock Heward from Fox had gone on, it was KSL Sports Zone, a radio show. So let me just read you from the Heartland College Sports article right now. It says, Fox's Brock Heward recently spent some time with both conferences last week at the Fiesta Summit in Arizona, a business summit that had members from both the Big 12 and Pac-12 in attendance. As a guest of the KSL Sports Zone radio show, Heward discussed his perspective on each conference's demeanor at last week's get-together. So Fiesta Summit last week, members from the Big 12 and Pac-12 are both there. Here's what Brock Heward had to say on this radio show. He said, quote, I was in Arizona on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I got to see Kyle Whittingham and his wife on Monday night at dinner. I got to mingle with a lot of the coaches and AD and commissioner, and then we did the same the next night with the Big 12. And I will tell you, you could not have had two different environments. I assume that would mean you could not have had two more different environments between the two. So here's what he had to say about the Big 12. On the Big 12, he said the Tuesday night get-together and shindig with the Big 12, there was so much momentum, so much energy. You know, the first-year commissioner is a driver. He's an expansionist, aggressive, and you feel it. The conference is following that lead as they got their TV deal, and they're not done. I like that quote for a number of reasons. I mean, one, it reinforces that there is some positive energy there. But two, it also just shows the part about the Big 12 kind of falling in line with the commissioner, I think, is important. And I've sort of tried to make that point before. Like, everything that he is doing right now is very much centered around we are trying to be proactive. We are trying to stand up for ourselves. I've said, like, even down to the way they've handled themselves on social media here, doing a little bit more preemptive strikes, touting the strength of the conference, not letting themselves just get run over narrative-wise out there. It's been setting the tone. Brett Yormark has really set a tone since he took over as the commissioner, and I think the rest of the league seems to be following suit and following in line with all of that, and that quote really reinforces that. And that's been one of the most important things about what he has done. I mean, obviously, the most important thing was getting the TV deal done at the number he did, when he did, with the two networks that he did. But beyond that, I think the most important thing that he's done is just completely change the way everybody thinks and acts in this conference. He has really helped kind of galvanize everybody in moving forward in a much more progressive, forward-thinking sort of direction, which has always really eluded this conference. That has been a big problem for the conference for a long, long time. So after that, you hear that quote. Once again, the quote about the Big 12. Tuesday night, the shindig with the Big 12, there was so much momentum, so much energy. Yormark is a driver. He's an expansionist, aggressive, and you feel it. The conference is following that lead as they got their TV deal and they're not done. And here's what he had to say about the Pac-12. He said, on the flip side, the night before with the Pac-12, I'm not going to say survivalist, but it was not a lot of vision cast. And how could it be with so much unknown in a media deal that, as one AD told me, guess what, guys? One AD told Brock Heward, quote, it's close. I'm sure you're shocked, absolutely as stunned as I was to learn that an AD told Brock Heward at this thing that the Pac-12 media deal is, quote, close. It's been close for about 6 months now. It's been close through John Canzano. It's been close through John Wilner. It's been close through the Pac-12's own unity statement. It's been close for months. But once again, that is the line that is being spewed. It is close. To finish the quote here, Heward, this is Heward talking. He says, close is good for horseshoes, and that's not good in this business because we've got to get this deal done. So again, the full quote from Heward here. On the flip side, the night before with the Pac-12, I'm not going to say survivalist, but it was not a lot of vision cast. And how could it be with so much unknown in a media deal that, as 180 told me, is close? But close is good for horseshoes, and that's not good in this business because we've got to get this deal done. So the end of that, you can kind of tell like his perspective, where he's coming from. He's coming from this as a concerned like Pac-12 alum. Like, we've got to get this done. I'm worried about this being close. And I would also assume that a part of this is like he's just annoyed like everybody else that they continue to say it's close, it's close, it's close when it hasn't actually been close and nothing is actually happening here. Even John Wilner in his mailbag that I was reading this week had a listener say, hey, basically everybody said this thing was going to be done in March or April, including you, and now it is still not done. So Wilner is receiving that sort of feedback from his own constituents. Like everybody in the Pac-12 is feeling the same sorts of things that we have touched on with that Pac-12 deal here. And to me, it was like further confirmation that you have people out there in the industry that know what they're doing, that are pretty well versed in what's going on here, that are saying like, look, we've heard this from you guys. You guys continue to say this. You can't get your timing right. You can't get your messaging right on anything. You just have to take everything with a grain of salt from Pac-12 presidents and leadership, athletic directors. Once again, I don't place I place more of that blame on George Kliavkoff than I do them, because I think they're just getting mixed messaging from the top, and that's where it all starts. And I think we can trace that back to Kliavkoff over-promising, under-delivering with what he thought the value of the conference was from the beginning. But others are starting to see that. It was Andrew Marchand last time I talked to you on a live show where he basically said, like, look, we've heard these guys say this before. We've heard George Kliavkoff say dumb things before. He pointed out the comments about chasing down the Big Ten and the SEC financially and how dumb that was, and the stuff about UCLA and it being a bad financial decision for them to go to the Big Ten. Everyone's kind of catching on to the BS, and it makes it all the more ironic that we had, and I've talked about this before, but the Canzano piece a while back that was painting Brett Yormark as this like used car slick salesman that you got to watch out for what he is trying to sell there. He's kind of the snake oil salesman sort of guy, when it's been the Pac-12 that continues to publicly say one thing and then be wrong. They're the less trustworthy ones, whereas Yormark comes through and makes tangible moves. How many of those have we seen? We've seen the TV deal. We've seen the Rucker Park thing. We've seen the talk about going to Mexico, and he's actually like going and making site visits out there, trying to move the conference internationally. They've done the combine. The Big 12 is going to have their own combine. Like, he is making tangible moves. Meanwhile, the Pac-12 talks a lot without anything actually happening. So that's the difference in the two right there. And Brock Huard is seeing through that like most people are right now. So anyway, credit to Heartland College Sports for aggregating that. Appreciate the interviews there with Brock Huard and Brett McMurphy to glean little bits of information there. But I think for a lot of people, that is the most interesting thing going on right now. To me, I would again beg to differ and say what's happening in the ACC right now, I think that's the potential real titanic seismic shifts that just is fascinating with how layered it is. And we're going to get into that here in just a minute on the show. But I see you guys chiming in with the donations. I'm going to get to those right now. If you want to join that chorus, you are certainly welcome to do so. Click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. If you want to do that, that is how you make your voice heard, get your question or comment on the show tonight. Guarantees that it gets on because it pins it up at the top of the chat for me. So it will be read, you will get on, and you're supporting the work I'm doing, bringing you Big 12 and conference realignment content on a regular basis here on this channel. All right, Steven, first out of the chute. What's up, my guy? Steven Smith says, do you think that if there's no TV deal by June 1st for the Pac-12, do you think other Pac-12 schools might think about leaving for greener pastures? June 1st feels probably a little too soon. I think most in the Pac-12 are kind of preaching, and I think Wilner will probably get to it later on in the show. He had a specific term where I think he kind of just bookmarked it as the summer. I don't know that I've seen a ton of like leaking into fall yet, but June 1st is pretty darn early there in the summer. And I think that's kind of the blanket statement right now that's being pushed, is like the summer is when things will get figured out. So if it's the summer, I don't think anyone would jump June 1st. Now, it's realignment. I could be totally wrong. I don't have inside info here. It's just all speculation. If they've come this far and nothing has happened yet, I would think that they would still wait it out unless there is something they're hearing internally where they're just not confident in anything getting done at all, or they're not confident in what this number is going to be. Maybe they've started to hear some whispers about what's going on at that point. I don't know. And maybe things will change after the quarterly board meeting tomorrow. Maybe there will be something out of that will start pushing Colorado and Arizona in one direction or the other. But I would say no, June 1st feels a little bit too early for me, even though, grand scheme of things, what we were being told 2 months ago on a timeline I think back then, if you would have asked me like, hey, June 1st, if there's not a deal in place, would other places look to leave? I'd say, yeah, probably so. Probably so. But I think the context on everything has changed here as this continues to leak further and further on. But unless there's some real, something that is really going to pressure them outside of just the generalities here of needing to get a deal done, it feels like Colorado and Arizona, at least like the Colorado thing where there was all that hubbub and MHV 3ER, whatever, was saying, hey, there could be a vote to leave as soon as tomorrow. We got the Colorado athletic director quote tweeting him. When all that was happening, it felt like Colorado was kind of like at that point saying like, hey, we know we've got a decision to make, but we're going to extend the deadline here, give them a little bit more time. So if that's happened, I would think they would probably wait beyond June 1st. But I appreciate the question, Stephen, and thank you for asking it. And thank you for being here and supporting the channel. BR James, what's up, BR James? BR James, why are Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona State dragging their feet? I think it's basically just as simple as like I've used this analogy before, nobody wants to move, right? Moving is a pain in the ass, even if it's for greener pastures, even if you are going somewhere that you perceive to be better, moving is a pain. And for all those schools, it makes more geographic sense for them still to be in the Pac-12. They wouldn't have to move and uproot anything. If they can get a similar deal to keep that conference together, they would prefer not to move to the Big 12. So if they feel like there is still a possibility that deal comes in very close, very similar, and they wouldn't have to move, they could just stay where they're at, that's going to be more advantageous to them than it is leaving for the Big 12. And there are even further complications beyond that. If you're talking about like Colorado specifically, it's their connection to California alums. They really like that. There are different things for different schools that would keep them more tethered to that. I mean, like Utah, they're in sort of a perfect situation from a football standpoint right now where they're still in Power 5 conference. They're dominating it. They seem to be in the hunt to win it, if not winning it every single year. Why would they want to leave that situation right now? They would not, especially to go to a league that has their arch rival in it already in BYU. So there are some specific reasons within the context of just the generalities that like nobody would want to move if they don't have to. And maybe there's also this obvious loyalty to the conference and saying, hey, we'll wait it out and at least see what the offer is before we go ahead and jump. Again, unless there's some impending motivator that I'm not thinking of outside that's going to like really hold their feet to the fire and be like, hey, you guys better just go now instead of waiting to see what this number is going to be. I mean, they don't really have to move until that would actually come to pass. So I don't, I guess you can call it dragging their feet. To me, it's being a little more pragmatic with it all and saying like, hey, what would ultimately be best for us? What would ultimately be best for these schools? As plain and simple as we could say, is the Pac-12 surviving and being on a similar level to the Big 12 in visibility and money. And that possibility does still exist out there, and they're just waiting to do their due diligence to see what that is. So I think that's the basic situation that you have there right now. Daniel, what's up? Cat fan in Huskerland, aka Daniel Osborne. Great to see you as always here. I appreciate you, my friend. Daniel says this TV deal for the Pac-12 better be good because you can put a fork in the Pac-12 if it isn't. Just watching you from Applebee's across from Children's Mercy Park after a soccer weekend in KC. Great show, John, and go Cats. Hey, shout out to you, Daniel. That sounds like an awesome weekend. I was just over by Children's Mercy Park earlier today for a little bit out at Nebraska Furniture Mart. So we were, our paths may have been pretty close to crossing today, Daniel, but I appreciate you watching the show. I appreciate your support. And yes, I mean, as the situation I just outlined a second ago was, if the deal isn't good, yes, the Pac-12 probably is going to be in serious trouble. We're just all in suspense right now as to what the real situation is. And is it going to be a good deal? Is there a good deal potentially still out there? Is there one available? Are they close to one? We really just have no absolute idea. In fact, let me, on the subject of that, Daniel, read you a part of John Wilner's mailbag. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. But I thought it was an explanation basically from Wilner as to why the timeline has been moved back. So he gets asked, this is the question I alluded to, should we expect a Pac-12 media deal to be announced soon? Many, including the hotline, reported that March was the targeted time frame. And Wilner said, yes, the hotline reported March or early April as the likely window for resolution, largely because that's what the university presidents were saying publicly and conference sources were discussing privately. So that's a new layer to it. He's saying that the private discussions with sources were telling him the same thing that everybody was saying publicly. He says, so why the delay? We see three possibilities. One, the conference was unable to land the deal it expected and had to start the process all over again. Two, negotiations progressed significantly, but the final steps are proving elusive. And three, the framework of a deal is set, but at least one media partner needed time for other reasons. And then he points out Washington State President Kirk Schultz alluded to this possibility in remarks last week. But then it's closed off here with Wilner just saying, our best guess, number two. So Wilner's best guess as to why this is taking so long is that negotiations progress significantly, but the final steps are proving elusive. That might be more along the theories that like an Apple or an Amazon is more heavily involved here, as we've heard about the quote persnickety nature of them in negotiations, that Apple for sure isn't going to bow down to anybody. They're going to operate on their timeline. They're not going to accommodate any sort of timeline, and they're just newer into the game. So they don't have experience doing these college rights deals before, which is just going to make it take longer, right? You don't have experience with something, it's going to take you longer to figure it out than if you have done it many times before, which your ESPN and Foxes of the world, they have done it many times over, negotiating these large sports deals. So you can understand why it would take less time for them to get everything all situated and ready to go. But I did think that was interesting. So Wilner feels like negotiations progress significantly, but the final steps are proving elusive. A part of that that's interesting is that he's dismissing, in a way, the comments of Kirk Schultz that the framework of a deal is set, but at least one media partner needed time for other reasons. And I feel like we kind of dispelled that with some of what we pointed out last week. Like ESPN has already, there were leaks that ESPN was involved in bidding for Pat McAfee when his $120 million contract is up. So this whole concern about optics, if it were ESPN, if they were concerned about optics, what about the optics of them being in the bidding game for Pat McAfee when that's going to be like a 9-figure contract there? And then we had the Sports Business Journal reporting that Amazon may not be actually really interested right now, that they could be out of the deal. And so, yeah, it tells me that Wilner has been paying attention to that here ever since those comments from Kirk Schultz was saying that number two would be the reasoning there. Anyway, Daniel, thought that related somewhat to your question, so or your comment. I hope you're enjoying your weekend in KC, and thank you for supporting the show as always. I appreciate you, man. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew Hunsacker. Matthew says way too much smoke for there not to be big changes coming over the next 3 weeks. I don't know. It feels like there's been a lot of smoke for a while. And without anything really happening, there's just a part of it is honestly like the realignment industry. And I say this, I feel like I'm pretty self-aware. I say this as a cog in the machine. There has been kind of a niche industry created around realignment where once you have that, like you need the news cycle to be fed. People are constantly doing interviews. That is an observation that I had when I started thinking about the 365 sports quote from Brett McMurphy. Is I was like, man, I mean, you've had McMurphy going on there. You've had Andrew Marchand going on with Josh Neighbors and Locked On Big 12, which, by the way, shout out to Josh Neighbors. Excited to hear what he has coming up next after that just ridiculous situation that he found himself caught up in. But you've had so many guys going on and doing, like Jim Williams has been doing the interview circuit. Like a lot of these guys in the industry, Bob Thompson, doing a lot of interviews, and it feeds this news cycle. And when you just get people talking on a daily basis about it, there are bound to be some quotes that come from it. That pressure has even been felt by the Pac-12 presidents and leadership as they get out there and do interviews, and then somebody takes a quote and runs with it. So we've created and kind of fueled a whole news cycle based on this. So that just sort of creates some smoke on its own. And that's not even mentioning, I mean, the people like me that are out here in 365 Sports that are doing shows every single week where you need content, you need speculation, you need talk, you need opinion, and then you need people who are in the industry to come on and say things too. And it just can be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy with some of the smoke. So I'm just throwing that out there as a, like, the smoke on this stuff in some ways is self-fulfilling. So I would be a little bit cautious in saying that. Also, I don't have confidence in the Pac-12 getting anything done in the next 3 weeks. And I do feel like Arizona and Colorado, at least as of right now, are going to wait to see what that is. And that would be the first domino really to drop there. The ACC smoke is definitely smoke, but they don't have like a quick short-term solution. Like having to lawyer up and figure out the grant of rights that's not a short-term solution for the ACC. So I think that's further down the road. I don't think like Notre Dame is moving. And it was reiterated in that McMurphy statement that the Big Ten doesn't really seem to have the appetite right now to go for the kill shot on Oregon and Washington. So that I think is our scenario. That's my quick rundown on why I don't think that there's going to be anything that happens in the next 3 weeks, but very well could be wrong, because the second that you think you're right about something, the second that you think things have calmed down in this conference realignment world, something does happen. So you may well be right, Matthew. You may well be right. And Lord knows we'd have some interesting shows if that were the case and something does happen in the next 3 weeks. Wolf 58, great to see you, man. Hello, Wolf 58 in the house. Wolf 58 says, at this point, why even ask Pac-12 presidents and ADs what's the status of your media deal? It's like banging your head against the wall. Insanity. I agree. I mean, if I were the Pac-12 presidents and ADs, like I maybe they're going to have to talk after their board meeting. I don't know how that works, and like what media will be there and what the standard operating procedure, what the protocol typically is around that. But if I were them, yeah, I would just stop talking about it. If you are a media member, like you are sort of obligated to continue to ask. But if I were anybody in Pac-12, I would just continue to be like, look, we're working on it. We'll let you know. We're working on it. We'll let you know. I would not say much more than that at all, because yeah, every time it happens, every time they open their mouths with some sort of date or some sort of statement where they think they're really marching in to make a powerful statement about what's going on, stuff changes and they wind up with negative headlines. They wind up getting made fun of. They're the butt of jokes. They look bad. They just look disorganized. And we've seen it happen over and over and over again. So I agree with you, Wolf 58. Like, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's where we're at with this. That is absolutely where we're at with this with the Pac-12. They continue to think something different is going to happen when they do open their mouths and talk, and nothing actually happens. So maybe they've learned their lesson by this point. I guess, the thing I would emphasize there is I do think it is still appropriate if you are like a journalist or somebody that's talking, a media member, somebody that's talking to one of these folks. You do still probably have to ask. I do think you probably have to ask until something happens. I would just be trying to do less of those if I were Pac-12 leadership right now, especially as it seems like Kliavkoff's position from the top down has been like, we're not going to talk much. I'm not going to do a whole lot of public speaking about what is happening here and what's going on. Tim McGreevy, I appreciate your support, my friend. I do not see a question or comment from you, Tim. I hope I'm not missing it. Try to let me know if I am, but I appreciate you. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being here on the channel tonight, hanging out and talking some Big 12 and some conference realignments. Where did R Web go? I just saw R Web in here. R Web, what's up, R Web? R Web says, FYI, Carnival Barker has replaced 50%er and Karen. You're right. I know exactly what you're talking about, R Web. I saw the first line of John Wilner's story. I believe that was the story about the Pac-12 meetings coming up, and this will be a nice segue into that. But first of all, with the obligatory Karen reference, all hail Lord Karen. All hail Lord Karen. Thank you for providing me with such a bountiful paycheck to be with you here talking tonight about what's going on in the Big 12 and the Pac-12. John Wilner's story. I'm glad you got as much a kick out of that as I did. Our web, let's see, it was before the ACC stuff. So this is a story from Wilner about the Pac-12 quarterly board meeting tomorrow. Here is the lead. This is the lead sentence. It says the number of realignment carnival barkers and basement couch Twitterati with an opinion on the Pac-12's existential crisis runs into the hundreds, if not thousands, across the college football landscape. Whoo boy, that is a sentence. The number of realignment carnival barkers and basement couch Twitterati with an opinion on the Pac-12's existential crisis runs into the hundreds, if not thousands, across the college football landscape. I mean, he's not wrong. There's nothing factually incorrect with what he said there. It is just funny to me. It's as the frustration grows on the Pac-12 side, you start to see a little bit more like lashing out with stuff like that. I mean, obviously, like the 12 and on term has been there for a long time. The longer that this continues to go for them, the more frustration builds, the more they get upset with people that do have opinions and that do point out the conundrum that they are in right now. And this feels shaded with some of that. And this is the guy that's doing this on the Pac-12 side with the most in terms of journalism cred. And again, you guys know I very much respect the journalism cred that he has. But I laughed. I mean, I laughed. It's funny. Realignment, carnival barkers, and basement couch Twitterati. So I don't know which one of those I fit into. If I'm a carnival barker or if I'm a what was it, basement couch Twitterati. Either one. I don't have a basement. I do have a couch, and I guess maybe I'm both. Maybe I'm both a carnival barker and a basement couch Twitterati member. But that could be a T-shirt. There's another potential T-shirt. The Pac-12 folks have given us a lot of great potential T-shirts. That could definitely be one of them. Also, I don't know, is the band name Carnival Barker taken? Basement Couch Twitterati. I think like that seems like a great band name in 2023. You might be dating yourself a little bit with that if Twitter ceases to exist at some point. And obviously you couldn't be a band that was formed before like 2007 if that was going to be the case. But Basement Couch Twitterati also seems like a pretty good band name. So if anybody's trying to start, I've been trying to bust out my guitar a little bit lately and play a little bit. I guess if and when I start a band, I'll make sure to call it Basement Couch Twitterati. I like that. Thank you, R-Web, for leading me straight into that. The rest of the story reads as follows. The number of people who know the details of the media rights negotiations and expansion strategy is probably closer to 15 or 20. Don't disagree with that either. I think that's the reality of the situation. There's a very small handful of people that actually know what's going on with the Pac-12 deal, whereas you have hundreds, if not thousands of people projecting their opinions about it, and many posturing as if they do really know what's going on. Many of them will convene Monday in Seattle for the quarterly board meeting. Here's the key sentence. If you want the one takeaway from this whole article about the Pac-12 quarterly board meeting tomorrow, this is it. It would be the presidents and chancellors are not expected to vote on a media deal or expansion. Resolution on both matters likely will come in the late spring or early summer. Okay, so that's actually a little bit more optimistic than what I was saying earlier, where I was like, have they mentioned fall yet? Are we starting to get into fall yet? Are we still in summer as the timeline from Pac-12 folks? That says late spring or early summer. So, I feel like we're in late spring basically right now, or getting close to it. So that would tell me like in the next couple of months, that's still sort of bookmarking it as the next couple of months to get a deal done. But either way, the first part of that, the presidents and chancellors are not expected to vote on a media deal or expansion would be the most important part of that, because anytime anybody sees a meeting, as we learned last time with MHV3, ER, McIver, whatever you want to call them, if we learned anything from that, it's that every time there's a meeting, people do kind of like rush to judgment or hope or think that something is going to happen, some sort of a decision is going to happen, and then it has not as of yet. As far as what's actually on the agenda here, here's some more from Wilner. He says, in fact, the twin pillars of Pac-12 survival will share the board's agenda with a litany of other issues, including updates on the Pac-12 networks and on-field competition, plus financial and legal affairs. And if you've been following this and everything that's gone on with the Pac-12, you should be pretty keenly aware that there are a lot of other things that are going to have to be talked about here. The Comcast issue with all the money that they're going to have to pay back Comcast. They had to get rid of two guys that were involved in that. They're now being sued by the guys that they got rid of. The number two in charge at the Pac-12 left to go work for a consulting agency that is now working with the Pac-12. Like, there's just been a ton that has been happening lately. And Wilner points out some of this. He says former Pac-12 executives Mark Shucken and Brent Willman have filed a wrongful termination complaint against the conference. Stemming from the Comcast overpayment fiasco. They're seeking in excess of $2 million in damages. A new piece of legislation winding through the California Assembly threatens to undercut the college sports economic model. The National Labor Relations Board is pursuing unfair labor charges against USC, the Pac-12 and the NCAA, as well as a part of an effort by college sports activists to have football and basketball players recognized as employees. And members of Congress are seriously considering federal guidelines for athlete compensation, including NIL, according to Sports Illustrated. So those are all things that he lists as on the agenda, in addition to just the obvious, the expansion conversation and the TV deal conversation. So the Pac-12 is going to have to sort through an awful lot at those meetings tomorrow. I would not expect much to come from this. Maybe that's the perfect cover for something will come from it, but right now does not expect or does not look like much is going to happen there. And Wilner is somebody I definitely would trust on that front. So just an update there for all of us Carnival Barkers and Basement Couch Twitterati folks. Tim, what's up, Tim? Now I see Tim McGreevy in the house. What's up, Tim? Tim, thank you for your support. Tim says, why would the Big Ten have blood on their hands? Oregon and Washington told the world they wanted to go to the Big Ten. Yes, but they also they took USC and UCLA, which is the first part of this. So I think you have to remember there with that. Yes, I'm saying the context like they don't want the blood of the Oregon and Washington thing on their hands, but really it would be that they would be completely obliterating the conference. Whereas they've only partially done that with USC and UCLA coming. If they did that and then followed it up with Oregon and Washington in short succession after, especially if they did it before any TV deal had been reached, like not even giving them a chance to fully flesh that out and negotiate that, I think that's where they feel like, I rightfully so, I would say that they would have a lot of blood on their hands with that. But I mean, make no mistake, they've got plenty on their hands already because the Pac-12 is kind of hemorrhaging blood right now, and it's size that's been stabbed in there. It's been the size of USC and UCLA. Fairly poor analogy on my part there, trying to make all that work, but I think you get the point. So it'd be the combination of those things, the aggregate of USC, UCLA, and then Oregon and Washington before letting this all play out with the TV deal is why they would feel that way. So I get it. You are right. I mean, you are correct. I will address that part. Like, you are correct that Oregon and Washington have made it very clear what their position is on that. And I think it's just become increasingly obvious. But the temperature got turned up there on their desire to go to the Big Ten and be in the Big Ten or the SEC because of the USC and UCLA move. So it was the Big Ten that already put that into play because they yanked those other two schools away from the Pac-12 already. That is how I would frame everything up there and say it. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan, appreciate you as always. Lovely to hear from you. Alan says, John, thanks for being the voice of the Big 12. Weary of the Pac-10 drama. Can't wait for KU upsetting Texas and OU in their final season and only 188 days until the Sunflower Showdown in Lawrence. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen. I like that. We got a counter already for the Sunflower Showdown in Lawrence, 188 days. That should be a hell of a football game. I will definitely grant you that. That should be a heck of a game. I would imagine the most anticipated KU K-State game that we've had in a very long time, assuming that things go to form throughout the season. KU upsetting Texas and OU. I mean, I think that's very much on the table. I think it's on the table. Like, Kansas should be capable of doing that. I tell you what, I've been a little bit annoyed, like just reading some of the preseason, really just like preseason college football Twitter, Big 12 Twitter articles, looking at Vegas odds, like all these different things. The love for Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel, I must just be, maybe I'm crusty, maybe I'm too biased against the departing Texas and Oklahoma. You guys tell me if I'm wrong, I suppose, but I feel like there's a little bit too much assuming that they are going to make some huge jump this year, or just overvaluing what they are because of the logo on the side of their helmets, man. I just was not overly impressed by either last year. I mean, Quinn Ewers still has Texas is in the Big 12 championship game, if not for Quinn Ewers going 19 for freaking 49 in Stillwater, completing like 36% of his passes and looking just awful. They would have been in the Big 12 championship game last year. So I don't know. It felt to me like Quinn Ewers was a hindrance a lot of the times that you watched Texas football last year. So Jalen Daniels is good. I would rather have Jalen Daniels as my quarterback. I would rather have Jalen Daniels as my quarterback. I will say that, Alan. So because of that, and because of Andy Kotelnicki, who's a phenomenal offensive coordinator, I think Kansas absolutely will have a shot there. So I'm with you on that. Anyway, appreciate the kind words, Alan, as always. Thank you for being here. Thank you for weighing in. And I will look forward to seeing you again soon here on the chat. Sometimes your names, guys, really get me. This one's getting me. Group Poop is in the house. Group Poop says, this is really, when Wilner is saying Carnival Barkers and Basement Couch Twitterati, I feel like he's imagining me sitting on a YouTube channel talking to somebody named Group Poop. I think that's probably what he's thinking. And you know what? Touche, Wilner, because here I am talking to somebody named Group Poop on the YouTube chat. But anyway, lovely to see you here, Group Poop. Thank you for coming by. Everyone but Utah fans, it seems, can see what's eventually going to happen. They 100% played themselves for no reason. I think Utah fans are. I understand, and I feel like I have said this before, even though I've had my wars with Utah fans. I get why they're at the place that they're at. They, for a long time, were waiting for this jump to get to a Power Five conference. They made the jump and they have killed it. They've knocked it out of the park. They win the league. They've played in Rose Bowls. They have, I mean, USC has been down and they've been one of the flag carrying conference members here in bringing some respectability to the league with how they play football. And so the last thing that they want is for this thing to blow up. They're looking around like, hey, wait, like this has been a great thing. Like, why is this happening right now? That this could possibly blow up in our faces because we finally made it. We finally got in that bat, right? We've been waiting on the bench forever. We finally got our shot and we hit a home run, pinch hit home run here. And now you're telling me like that's just going to go away. We don't get a chance to start after that. We didn't earn a place on the roster. That is the feeling that would be permeating you there if you are Utah. And not only that, but you're saying like, hey, we would be going to a conference with our arch rival BYU, who we've tried to hold over their heads that we're in this great league and they're not. Like, I think there are a lot of dynamics there that have pushed them into the corner that they're in. And so, of course, they're going to be looking for any morsel they can slurp up from the Canzanos of the world that is going to make them feel better about the position that and to not have that blow up. So, I think if you gave a lot of them truth serum, they may well admit, hey, yeah, this is pretty precarious. This doesn't feel great. Even if they think ultimately deep down that they're going to survive, they would probably with some truth serum admit more than they are on the Bird app right now that like, yeah, this is not a great situation. It's certainly less than ideal for the Pac-12. But, it's Twitter. You got a posture. You're looking for things that will confirm your beliefs. They're far from the only people that do that. We all do that, myself included. Like that's just a thing that happens in today's day and age, and there are plenty of people to provide you with things that you do want to hear. So that's my assessment of it, group poop. But and played themselves for no reason. I think Utah has as much reason as anybody in that entire conference in the Pac-12. I guess Oregon State and Washington State probably as well. But they're not in as much a position of power. But they have as much reason, Utah does, as anybody else in that league to want it to stay together. So that's, of course, why they're going to posture that way. I mean, you're right that they are definitely there are a lot of delusions there. I mean, the message board genius Twitter account did a great job highlighting one of those this week, which was a Utah fan saying, hey, why don't we just let Colorado and Utah leave, and then we'll take the 4 best teams from the Big 12 once we clear that dead weight of Colorado and Arizona, as if that were like a realistic situation that was going to happen. So, there are definitely some folks there that a little bit irrational in their beliefs. Juan, what's up, Juan? Thank you for being here, man. Great to see you. Appreciate you stopping by as always. Juan says, San Diego State seems confident they'll go to the Pac-12 or Big 12 by June 30th at least because their exit fees jump from 15 mil to 45 mil on July 1st. I have a feeling the Big 12 isn't considering group of fives now. Thoughts? Yeah, that is an important date to remember as we talk about this. And as John Wilner says, late spring, early summer for something actually happening here with the TV deal. That June 30th / July 1st date is important to keep in mind because, yes, that will make life much more difficult on San Diego State if they were to jump somewhere. So maybe that is something to monitor. If we start getting close to that deadline and there still is no Pac-12 deal, maybe then the heat gets turned up a little bit and the Big 12 would try to put more of a full court press on San Diego State. I don't know how the Big 12, you're saying I have a feeling the Big 12 isn't considering group of fives now. I think they may not be seriously considering that. I would imagine that they are probably, at least, especially in the case of San Diego State, open to consideration with that because you'd be dealing a blow to the Pac-12 and taking away their best expansion opportunity. You are getting another school in that coveted West Coast slot where you could play after dark games, would be more valuable to your TV contract because of that. And they have athletic programs that are ready to go. I mean, they probably deserve to be in a Power 5 conference here if we're being honest about it. So I would bet that there is consideration being given to that. Whether or not it is serious, I don't know. And whether or not if that deadline approaches, if Yormark would use that as some leverage there to try and get them to the Big 12, I do not know. But I'm glad you bring that up, Juan, because that is something that it's going to be June before we know it. And the way things are moving, in Pac-12 country, how slow it is with this TV deal, that could come up on us very quickly with nothing still having happened. And that will start to make things much more interesting. Maybe at that point, then the Pac-12 has to announce expansion before they would have a TV deal. I mean, there are a lot of layers to how that could all go down as that deadline approaches. What's up, Brian? Brian Ness in the house. Appreciate you, Brian. I'm saying that too much tonight, guys. I must think this is like a 1995. I'm like on MTV in 1995. Everybody's in the house. Brian says, hi, John. As an Oregon fan, I would rather have seen them stay in the pack with USC, UCLA. I'm excited for the future to go watch the Ducks play in some of the legendary stadiums of the Big Ten. # Go Ducks. How about that? Look at that, guys. Brian, Oregon fan Brian here, already saying, I'm excited for the future to go watch the Ducks play in some of the legendary stadiums of the Big Ten. He's already bought in. He already is there. And I say it, Brian, I'm not mocking at all. If I were an Oregon fan, that's exactly the position I would have. Like, we're getting to the Big Ten, come hell or high water at some point. I just want that to happen. Let's get to the point where we are there. And I would probably feel the exact same way. It would be better if things were just the same and the Pac-12 were strong and we kept all these leagues intact and none of this was happening. I think it would be a better situation for all parties involved. I agree with you there. But what my question, Brian, to you would be, and like what I would just be curious about with Oregon fans is like, are most people there? Are most people there where it's like formality, we will get in the Big Ten, or is there like legitimate concern about it? What is the thought about signing Wilner continues to say like 5 to 7 year grant of rights with the Pac-12. We're talking like 7 years, man. That's a long way to go as far as the grant of rights goes to be signing them away. And that brings me to actually, I'm going to pause and throw this in there. There was one, the first part of Wilner's mailbag that I wanted to read to you here. Let's go through this. The question to Wilner is, do you expect the exit fee and the new grant of rights to be similar to those in place for the ACC and Big 12? So the question here is, do you expect the exit fee and the new grant of rights to be similar to those in the ACC and Big 12? Oregon and Washington may be hesitant to sign one that has steep penalties. And I've been asking the question for a while, like how are you going to get them to sign something that would be 5 to 7 years, something up to 7 years? How are you going to, when they're feeling, you've got fans, like what we just saw a minute ago with Brian, you've got fans that are already counting this as a formality. They're going to be in the Big Ten. How are you going to get them to sign their rights away for 7 years with some kind of penalty attached to it? It's a great question. And I just have not seen that really addressed much at all. Like there has not been much talk about that. And what does Wilner do here in this response? He just completely dodges the question. Like there's no answer to it. So that was the question. And here was his response. I've mentioned this before when fans wondered about the fragility of a 6 or 7 year grant of rights for the Pac-12, but it's worth repeating. Nobody will ever lock in their media rights for 10 or 12 years or more. The ACC's 20-year deal, which expires in 2036, is a dinosaur in that regard. There's too much money at the media rights buffet for conferences to pass on chances to feed as frequently as possible. That's why the Big Ten signed a 7-year deal. That's why the Big 12 agreed to a 6-year deal. And that's why the Pac-12 is seeking a contract that lasts anywhere from 5 to 7 years. I feel maybe he just misunderstood that question, but to me, that's completely missing the mark and feels like purposefully missing the mark there. I don't think the idea there was like, hey, Oregon and Washington would be hesitant to sign a deal that's not a monster 12-year deal like they've always been. I think the question was the opposite. Like, why would they sign up for something at 5 to 7 years that would be even that long with exit fees attached to it when they clearly want to be in the Big Ten and they've been cleared and vetted, to tie everything together into this story. Like the Big Ten just kind of waiting for the right moment here. Why would they sign that? And we don't get an explanation from Wilner on that. I think that is one of the pressing questions in all of this that nobody on the Pac-12 side wants to address or talk about. There's lots of talk, and rightfully so, about how everything will be evaluated when with the 4 corner schools, like how the 4 corner schools will weigh their options. Not as much talk about like Oregon and Washington and actually getting them to sign on the dotted line in this thing. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Appreciate you being here, Matthew. Matthew says, by the way, I love the 555 there, Matthew. Just differentiating yourself. There you go. Setting yourself apart. Wonder if we'll see another unity statement come out of the Pac-12 board meeting. Last unity statement was in February about imminent TV rights, and it fell flat. February. I'm glad you pointed out that that was February. March, April, May. So we're a good solid like 3 months past the unity statement, which said that a TV deal will be consummated in the near future. So much for that. I doubt that we're going to get any sort of unity statement anymore because they know that that's been made fun of. They know that that turned into kind of a joke. They also know that just like anytime they go open their mouth about any sort of timeline or anything, like it's just not working. I highly doubt that we get any sort of statement coming out there because I would think they have to learn from their mistakes, right? I mean, if we do, Matthew, I think that to me, if I were a Pac-12 fan, that would be wildly disappointed if there were some disappointing if there were some kind of statement to come out of that. Like, just guys, just stop with the statements, stop with it. It's actions. We need actions. They speak louder than words. No more words. We need actions. But you're right. That thing fell very flat, and it has been a long time since that happened. Starter 179. Starter 179. What is up, Starter 179? Congrats to Texas Tech winning another Big 12 track championship. Yes. Shout out to the Red Raiders there. Having done a couple of those broadcasts here over the last few years, the Big 12 track and field meets, I know about the prowess of the Red Raiders there, and they are very good, very, very good. So congrats, Tech. Rob, what's up, Rob? Rob says, Rob S. here as always. Rob says Texas goes 5-7 without Bijan last year. Don't know why anyone thinks UT will be drastically better without him. KU goes 4-8 if ISU and Tech don't choke. Ooh, wow. All right. So Rob's down on Texas and Kansas, going back to that conversation from earlier. I don't know about 5-7, but because I mean, like Roschon Johnson was also pretty good. Like Bijan's like elite, out of this world talent. Roschon Johnson's a very good running back. So like your typical average, very good running back. I think they still would have been over 500, but Bijan was a huge part of what they had. You cannot underestimate the loss of not having him on the roster as much as, Urban Meyer wants to say the rest of the roster is as talented as anybody's in the country. I guess I kind of get that thought, even if I would disagree. But Bijan was a special, like once in a maybe generation is a little bit too strong. Once in a decade, I would say, like once in a decade kind of talent at running back. That's going to be tough to replace. And like I said, I still have major questions about Quinn Ewers as the quarterback there. And it doesn't appear, at least if the spring game was any indication, that Arch Manning is going to be ready to go to take over and be an elite quarterback from day one. So, yeah, I'm with you with the questions on Texas. Kansas goes, oh, I see. Okay, you're saying Kansas goes 4-8 last year if Iowa State and Tech don't choke, I'm guessing is what that is. Or is it this year? I don't know, because didn't they lost to Tech last year. So I guess maybe that is a statement about this year. I don't think KU will be 4-8. I think I've got Kansas at about 7-5 right now. I do think the question Kansas fans have to kind of reconcile with themselves is like how difficult is that jump to go from 6 or 7 to like 8 or 9, or even if you're thinking like Big 12 championship, like something more like that. I think that step is more difficult than going from 2 wins to 6 wins like they did last year. So it may not come as fast as Kansas fans want there, but I think there's too much there for them, especially on offense, too much there for them not to be a sub 500 team this year. Boom to the Sooner. What's up, Boom to the Sooner? Boom to the Sooner says, if the Big Ten grabs Washington and Oregon, does that ensure that the Big 12 gets Colorado, Utah, Arizona, etc.? I guess if you want to engineer it that way and say like, hey, the Big Ten would go get Washington and Oregon, does that ensure the Pac or the Big 12 gets the 4 corners? I mean, if Oregon and Washington were to leave, that league's in a world of hurt, and I would think there would be panic that really sets in at that point, and that probably would happen. I just don't think that's the way it would go down in any scenario. McMurphy was basically laying out earlier in the show, as we discussed, that like the scenario would be they're waiting. They're not going to do it now. They're going to wait and see if 4 corner schools would leave. And then if 4 corner schools would leave, then they might hop in and do the Washington, Oregon thing. The other part that's tricky about that is like we just talked about, grant of rights, exit fees. If that all happens and the Pac-12 gets a deal on the table and then the 4 corner schools decide not to leave, theoretically, the Pac-12 has then signed a contract with exit fees, with a grant of rights that would then be tricky for Oregon and Washington to break, or at least certainly financially very painful for them to break and leave. And so then does that affect timing on them with the Big Ten? So I just something else to keep in mind there on that front. Still got a couple donations I'm working through. The way this is going, guys, I really wanted to talk about this ACC situation. It might have to just be a separate video. I promise I'll give you at least like the cliff notes on it real quick before I get out of here. But to fully dive deep into that, I mean, that could even be the live show next Wednesday. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. Zach, what's up, Zach? Zach says, calling my shot since he wins 7 football games this year. Not a great year, but proving those odds maker dorks super wrong. Okay. I like it, Zach. I like the confidence. And I feel like, Zach, the last time I remember you talking about Cincinnati, you were like kind of pretty iffy on the Scott Satterfield hire, which like I am. I wasn't crazy about it, but Big 12 over under football wins. I felt like Cincinnati was like 4.5. I'm going to double check my recollection here. Yep. Cincinnati 4.5. All right. So big time pounding the over there. Is Zach. I will say this, Zach, about Cincy. I talked a lot about like last year championship DNA still being in the Baylor program or even like in Oklahoma State. I mean, Cincy's got some championship DNA. Obviously, yes, it was at the American level, but it was also at the college football playoff level. That's still in that program. Even if the head coach isn't there anymore, it's not Luke Fickell. Even if you're changing conferences, like they've won a lot here recently. And that means something that will help carry you. So it would not shock me. I mean, in fact, like if I were I would pick the over 4.5 for Cincinnati. It would not shock me to see them get to 7 wins. I think that would be a great job in year 1 if that's where they wound up. Juan, what's up, Juan? Juan, appreciate you chiming back in. Juan says, Coos explored the possibility of Amazon throwing their 1 game a week money towards the Big 12. And that would help 2 teams jump from the pack while giving new Big 12 teams about a $7 million raise each. Thoughts? My first thought is putting a specific dollar amount on it, like, hey, that would give the Big 12 teams a $7 million raise each. I'm just very hesitant to put dollar figures on anything. And I'm saying this I don't know what Kuz said. And I like and respect Kuz a lot. I think you guys all know that have been here for a long time. So I would guess that there was some math that went along with that, like what the speculation would be that Amazon would pay, what money they have available. I don't know what kind of math he was doing on that, but when John Wilner says like, hey, 15 to 20 people really know what's going on here, 15 to 20 people really know what the valuations are on these sorts of things, I really do abide by that. I just think it's almost impossible for any of us or even some of the sources in the media world that talk and do interviews. I think it's almost impossible for us to like really know what the true monetary value of all of that is. So I'm hesitant to do that. If Amazon threw their 1 game a week money towards the Big 12, it would help give 2 new teams jump. I mean, maybe something like that happens. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think that's realistic or imminent. Realistic is probably the wrong word. I'm just stammering a little bit here because I haven't really thought of this. I don't have anything profound for you on that one. I would just be careful about thinking like, hey, that'll guarantee this amount of money for the Big 12. I do know that obviously the last Sports Business Journal report with Marshawn was like, hey, Amazon could be likely out here with the Pac-12. So maybe that comes back into play, but I don't know. We have not heard anything about that or seen any kind of real smoke with that. I don't even know how that would work with like the Big 12's current existing TV contract. I don't think that could really, like, that's another part that just popped into my brain. Like, how do you work that when you already have a TV deal? I guess maybe if like your pro rata comes in, that seems to me to get very, very convoluted, right? Because the Big 12 just signed a TV deal. And so Amazon, the whole thought with Amazon has been Amazon would get the best game. They would want the best game. They've done Thursday Night Football standalone. They don't want to be messing around with like a second or third tier sort of game. So if you're talking about Fox and ESPN just signed on for a deal where they're going to be getting Big 12 TV rights, how are you then going to come in and say, well, hey, actually, Amazon's going to get first whack at it? Like Amazon would get the first choice. So that's very complicated, convoluted to me, and I'm cautious about throwing specific dollar figures on things. Just my thoughts there. But like I said, it's kind of, and I know you weren't trying to put me in an unfair position, Juan, but I do feel like it would be unfair of me to speculate a ton about that without actually specifically hearing what Koo said or like the way that he did it or went about it. But it's an interesting hypothetical to consider. I just run into a lot of roadblocks with that in my head. The Yates 27. What's up, the Yates 27? How long exactly can the Pac-12 teams wait on a deal? How long exactly? I mean, there's not really like a set in stone date. It's just kind of like how much gumption do they have? At what point do you lose faith in the guy that's going to the negotiating table for you? Maybe the one thing I would say maybe that comes into it is like if that June 30th date with San Diego State is going to cause them to miss out on San Diego State, and then San Diego State would get poached by the Big 12 or something. And now you're down your best expansion candidate, and you're talking about like SMU and Tulane or whatever being the next. Maybe that turns into sort of a deadline there, but there's not really like a hard deadline as of right now. Brian, what's up, Brian? All right, I'm excited to hear from Brian again, Oregon fan who's in the chat here tonight. Brian says, I don't think you can get Oregon to sign a long grant of rights with the Pac unless this is all a smoke show. If it is a lie, Oregon goes to the Big 12, and I would be excited to see that, but also stay in bad. Pac-12 is a no to me. I don't think you can get Oregon to sign a long grant of rights to the Pac-12 unless this is all a smoke show. I don't. And when we say long, I guess we have to define long, and that's the part where I've just been a little surprised at the way it's gone with the Pac-12 reporting side of things, because 7 years to me feels very long. And I know historically for TV deals, that's very short. The ACC is like 85-year deal, right? Historically, it's very short. But right now, based on the way media values go up and the way everybody's wanting to do things and how much movement there is, 7 years is pretty damn long. So, yeah, I was thinking like 3 to 5 for Oregon on this thing if they were going to get them to sign something. And plus, we have heard from Pac-12 folks for a while that like, hey, getting to market sooner is an advantage because the price of live sports continues to go up, up, up. So a lot of that would push me to shorter and shorter. I think it will be hard to get Oregon to sign anything long-term there. So I am also very interested to see that you say you'd be excited to see Oregon in the Big 12, but staying in the bad Pac-12 is a no. Because again, like the messaging, I would love a poll of Oregon fans as to how they feel about that message from like John Canzano, for instance, who's based out of Oregon, has been like, no, way better for Oregon to stay in the Pac-12, get them to add a couple teams, stay in the Pac-12, get to the playoff every year by winning that league with it being a little bit down, as opposed to going to the Big Ten, taking less revenue and having to compete with everybody there for like an at-large spot or maybe a conference championship. And certainly there's been no credence given to anyone out there about the Big 12 option. The Big 12 feels very unlikely. Like you'd be moving, knowing that you have another move coming in mind down the road, moving to like a temporary place before you get your permanent spot. Nobody really wants to do that unless they would absolutely have to. But I'm glad, Brian, that you would be excited about it. I know we'd be excited about it here in Big 12 country if that were to actually happen. But yeah, Brian, hope you are back soon, my friend. We get recruit some Oregon friends in here to the chat. We'd love to get more Oregon perspectives here on everything that's going on, because I feel like that's just been very quiet. We see Utah fans are very loud. Most of the Pac-12 noise that I see on Twitter comes from like everybody but Oregon and Washington. I do not see a lot of Oregon and Washington talk here. And as far as like their athletic directors and leadership goes, they've been very quiet too. Connor, what's up, Connor? Connor says, just getting here. Don't know if it's been asked, but have you seen the Cincy new $130 million indoor sports facility? And if you have, what are your thoughts? I have not, Connor. I have not. Let me give that a quick Google. Cincinnati indoor facility, $130 million. I see 3 days ago, Cincinnati unveils details of $134 million indoor practice facility. All right. Some renderings. That looks pretty cool. I feel like there are some similarities in how that looks to the indoor facility that K-State literally just unveiled. 84,000 square feet, climate-controlled practice facility. Oh, boy, the outside of that looks awesome. The first picture I saw was just a picture of the inside. The outside of that, very unique and looks awesome. 96,000 square foot performance center. Funding, a transformational gift from prominent boosters. Trying to see if there are any other key details here. No, it looks great, man. I mean, it looks great and shows support by Cincinnati to, or just a what do I want to say? Like they're putting in the effort. They're putting in the effort to beef up their programs as much as possible while making this jump to the Big 12. And you have to do that. You have to be all in. That's one of the things I saw immediately in UCF when they were making this move, that financially they were trying to get everybody motivated, and they knew that this was their chance to really capitalize on things and get going. So it looks great. It looks great. I'll have to do a little more like time to give that a more full view than I just did there. But like the rendering of the outside of that was sick. Like that was really cool looking. So I like it. I like it, Connor. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Neilio, what's up, Neilio? Neilio says, another great show, John. Keep up the great works. Hashtag great work. Hashtag go Cats. Thank you, Neilio. Appreciate you being here. As always, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Always love your support and love seeing you pop in here on the chat. So thank you, Neilio. Everybody say hello to Neilio. Make sure to give him your support as well. The Yates 27, let's go Mountaineers. Love the show, John. Thank you, the Yates 27. I saw West Virginia won another recruiting battle against Dion, right? They got Dion for a kid. I think that's happened a couple times that they've out-recruited him, because I saw the Smoking Musket tweet something like, if I were a Colorado fan, I'd be pretty concerned about the fact that Neil Brown has beaten Deion Sanders for multiple recruits here, which, gives me the temperature in Morgantown and how people are feeling about that whole operation right now. But I found that pretty funny. Rowdy Every Point. What's up, Rowdy Every Point? Rowdy Every Point says, if the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 could get together and find a place for every school. Okay, if the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 could get together and find a place for every school, the ACC will be gone and the grant of rights and exit fees vanish. Well, so I'm trying to follow that. If the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 get together, I mean, you get together and find a place for every school. Well, so the problem with that is like the SEC and the Big 10 have no motivation to that'd be a charity. Look, I love the Big 12. Love the Big 12. That would be charity work for the SEC and Big 10 to be taking on the Big 12 there. It's just none of that would be additive for them from a financial standpoint. That'd be kind of watering everything down. And then I don't quite get where the ACC would be gone and like the grant of rights would be gone there, because no ACC teams are actually leaving. Okay. I'm following now. I'm getting this. You're saying if the SEC, Big 10, and the Big 12 are like the three conferences, so they would take everybody else, like best of the rest. I think you're just a little bit off in how you're seeing this. Like how this would have to happen, that wouldn't happen until the ACC would have to dissolve first. You would have to get the Big 10 and the SEC would pick out Miami, North Carolina, Florida State, Clemson. They would pluck those schools, find homes for them, and then the Big 12 scoops up the best of the rest in the ACC. And then you kind of have your three major conferences there. I assume in this scenario it would be like the Four Corners are then coming over to the Big 12, Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, maybe North Carolina to the Big 10, and then Clemson, Florida State, Miami to the SEC. And then you have the Big 12 as the best of the rest. Then you've got your three conferences, your Big 2, your one that's going to be a little bit smaller, and that maybe is what breaks off there. I think that's probably the scenario that you're trying to outline, if I am following that correctly. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew Hunsaker. Matthew checking in again. Appreciate you, man. Matthew says, thanks, John. Blue Cougs, appreciate your insights and updates. ACC showing cracks is the next big wrinkle. Who from ACC would your mark target? Big topic. I mean, I don't know. Like, it would just be, I guess the part about targeting it to me is that feels like very far down the road. I mean, my guess would be like Louisville was already heavily considered once upon a time for the Big 12 when like the West Virginia TCU stuff was going on. So I guess Louisville would probably be there. Let me pull this up. I don't know if you're thinking like Virginia Tech teams in the, let's go. ACC football standings. Yeah, you're looking in like the tier of like Louisville, NC State, Syracuse, Pitt. I think Pitt would definitely be there. Georgia Tech, maybe they get scooped up. Maybe they find a home in the Big Ten in this sort of scenario. So yeah, I guess you'd be looking like Louisville, Pitt, Duke, that kind of tier of school there from the ACC. That would just be my guess. But yeah, I really, yeah, like honestly, you guys have kind of pushed me away from the ACC stuff tonight, which is totally fine, totally fine. But let me give you just a brief rundown of what that is, and I will try to get deeper into it, whether it's on the next live show or in a standalone video. But there was another article written by War Chant, Florida State's on 3 site, who like all I know is the stories that I've read here in the last couple months about this topic, and they've just been really well done. Not only getting very important and newsworthy quotes, but doing a great job of laying out the story with clearly some sourced information worked in there. According to second-year athletics director Michael Alford, Florida State will not be backing down from their position of saying that something has to change in the future as far as the money goes in this conference, and that's with meetings on the horizon for the ACC. Their athletic director said Florida State will continue to push ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips and the other schools for uneven revenue sharing. So Florida State, Clemson, they want a bigger piece of the pie in the conference. Here's a quote from the athletic director. I make no bones about it that we're the top brand in the conference. When you look at how they measure media contracts with households, viewership, et cetera, we are driving the viewership for our conference at a high rate. So Florida State feels like they're the best brand there. They want to be compensated as such. Article points out, I mean, they're going to be like $30 million behind their peers in the SEC. Where was the quote? Here was, to me, like kind of the money quote of the whole thing. He says, I compliment, this is the Florida State AD. He says, I compliment Jim Phillips and his staff for everything they're trying to do. They understand what's coming. I've made it abundantly clear that there's a $30 million gap that's starting next season, and that can't go on for years because then you just can't catch up. So he's saying, look, like we're demanding unequal revenue sharing, and this wide gap can't go on for years because then you can't catch up. And the important part about that is there was a little nugget in this article earlier saying that the most that unequal revenue sharing could create, the most optimistic projections for unequal revenue sharing would yield an additional $5 million for schools like Florida State each year. Obviously, that's nowhere close to the $30 million that would be the gap there. So if the quote is this can't go on forever, and the max with unequal revenue sharing is 5, and they're looking to make up 30, all that seems to me like Florida State laying the groundwork for leaving, laying the groundwork for finding a way to the SEC. That's how all that reads to me. How easy that's going to be, how hard it's going to be, whether or not they're able to accomplish it, that's the real discussion here. But included in that article, again, from War Chant that they had already had in a previous article was like, hey, they've had lawyers down there digging through that grant of rights to see how feasible it would be to get out of that. So, yes, Matthew, I think the ACC is going to be a very, very intriguing thing to watch. And it's sort of simmering right now. And we're starting to see and hear a little bit more of this. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Brian back in it again. Oregon fan Brian. Brian says, I personally can't stand Canzano at all. And the people I know can't either. John, I'm glad I was finally able to catch one of your live streams. Me too, Brian. Thank you for that. And look, I don't think that Canzano take is going to be met with much resistance around here. Yeah, we're not the biggest fans either around here. So good stuff, Brian. Good stuff. Thank you for being here, and look forward to seeing you here once again. Good perspective. I love the Oregon perspective here tonight. Juan, what's up, Juan? Juan says, sorry, John, was just asking what was on my mind. Never meant to put you on the spot. Super bullish on the new four starting play this year. Go Cougs. Hey, no worries at all, Juan. I know that there was no like ill intent there. I just want to be fair, right? Like I just want to be fair to all parties involved. So I didn't know specifically what Cougs was getting at there. And I'm just giving you the free flowing thoughts off my brain there with that. It feels complicated and feels tough to say like, hey, it would bring this much value specifically, but no hard feelings at all, Juan. I totally get it, man. Totally get it. And I'm happy to answer whatever questions you do have, even if it's tough for me to think through sometimes and get my words straight. Like I was struggling for a little bit there. David, what's up, David Z? David C says, what up, Kurtz? Appreciate the content and thanks for your work. Go Cyclones. Thank you, David. We haven't even talked, David, we haven't talked about your clones and the gambling thing going on, right? Iowa State and Iowa both fielding some investigations into gambling allegations there, and the Iowa State football team was included in all that. I will say I've been a little bit careful to dig too much into that or like poke and prod too much on that because like Kansas just had sports betting legalized within the last year. I just wonder how much of this is like we're going to see this at like every school, and the Iowa Sports Commission gambling. I don't know. Whoever the hell does these things is just ahead of the game on this. And Iowa State's trying to get out in front of it. Like, I don't, this to me seems like something that very easily a lot of other schools could run into eventually here. So I will not be casting a ton of stones on all of that out of fear of that, but I know it's got to be a little disconcerting for Cyclone fans. Anyway, that's probably not the angle you wanted me to go with that, David, but that was the first thing that popped into my mind. I realized we had not talked about that story much yet. Michael. What's up, Michael? Michael, I appreciate you being here. Thank you, as always. Michael says, sorry, broken record here. No Utah to the Big 12. Thursday, Utah fans on a local SLC radio said they don't want to play BYU again. Utah's above that. Utah's above that. Come on, man. I mean, just because you lose the Rose Bowl does not mean that you can't go play BYU. Give me a freaking break with that. I mean, you guys know where my heart lies in the Holy War, but that just gets my blood boiling a little bit there some more, and that makes me want to see you guys go get to beat them down in a conference game. So I'm with you on that, Michael. That seems like, I mean, where Utah fans get off of that, like, God, I just want them to be left on the side of the road, the Mountain West, man. Utah's above that. Just because you go get your butt kicked in the Rose Bowl every year doesn't mean that you're above freaking anybody. Rob. What's up, Rob? Rob says Florida State Clemson drew the same viewership as Oklahoma State K-State, and FSU was on ESPN and ABC at 7:30. K-State was on Fox at 3:30. Florida State needs to check themselves before they wreck themselves, right? Florida State's got an ego. That is one thing. I mean, I don't even think the article was really like that bad with it. It was more just reading the quotes of the athletic director, and then there was also something pointed out in that War Chant article that had said the official, I think it was the football Twitter account for Florida State, tweeted out there were stats from somewhere about like there were 3.4 million people that identified as Florida State football fans in the South. There was something about like how many people identified as fans of Florida State, and that made them like a top 5 brand in college football. They had taken the numbers and spun them that way, which, like, hey, I mean, that's what the official account probably should be doing. But it became clear to me, like, yeah, Florida State fancies themselves based. I mean, they seem to have like an SEC sort of attitude there, right? Obviously, the on-field results have not matched up for a long time from Florida State, but they definitely have an ego. But they also definitely have a brand. I mean, Florida State has been a cool brand for a while, even when they were really struggling. So I will at least give them that. But yes, when we're talking about on-the-field results and then like TV numbers from last year, yes, I think you're making very fair points there. You're making very, very fair points there. This is a great way to close it off here. R-Web. R-Web, no one wins the Rose Bowl like Utah. Just ask them. You're right, R-Web. No one wins the Rose Bowl like Utah. Just ask them. I don't know. Maybe Utah could start asking about, like a recount of the Rose Bowl or something. Just have someone go rewatch the game, rewatch the film, make sure that didn't actually turn out differently. You can't. I mean, look, Penn State's about the most overrated football program in the country, and can't even handle them. All right, we've got one more in here before the buzzer. McKay Boyle. What's up, McKay Boyle? McKay Boyle says, do you think the Big 12 enters the Pacific time zone by adding Oregon State and Gonzaga? I mean, I think it's very likely that the Big 12 is going to enter the Pacific time zone. It's not going to be with Oregon State. Respect for Oregon State's football program, empathy for Oregon State's position. Certainly, as a K-State fan, I fully realize that we were in the same boat in July 2021 that the Oregon State's in right now. Unfortunately, the reality is they're not going to be additive for anybody, so they're in a really difficult spot here. Gonzaga maybe, because those who have watched this channel for a while know that I'm pretty strongly on board with, like, I think Yormark really will try to get the Big 12 basketball rights as their own separate entity and make some extra money that way. And to do that, you're going to need as much juice as the Big 12 has basketball-wise now. You probably do need to go that route with Gonzaga. And then if you maybe go big basketball super conference, pluck some of those schools from the Big East, it would probably be something along those lines. All right. I'm exhausted, guys. Almost an hour and a half tonight. Appreciate you all being here. Good questions, good conversation. Love that we had this here tonight, but it is time for me to bid you farewell. Continue to spread the word about the channel, friends, family, word of mouth, social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook groups, fans of the Big 12, fans of your school. Spread the word about the channel. Let's continue to grow this thing. You can like the video, totally free, easy way to support me. Leave a comment on the video, whether you love me, hate me, agree, disagree, whatever it is, leave that comment. That helps me as well. You can support the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4 as well, if you would be so inclined to do that, especially if you didn't catch this live and you want a way to support the channel, you can definitely do that. And last word goes to Justin. I'm sorry, UCF fans, UCF Twitter Mafia, don't come after me. This is Justin, our resident USF fan, but he says UCF sucks. That's the final word there to Justin. It wasn't me. It was Justin. He plays the game well. He knows he's good in the clutch. Justin is very good in the clutch. He knows how to come in and hit those buzzer-beating shots on here, man. He knows how to hit those buzzer-beating shots. All right. With that, I will talk to you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night and have a great start to your week tomorrow. Take care.